Hello and welcome back to Tales from the Pit. I'm your intrepid pitsman, Mr. Michael Swaim, and this is your combination trigger warning and introduction. If you've been listening to the show lately, you're probably aware that I'm expecting my first child, a boy, in at least biologically born a boy, in January, mid-January, and in honor of that occasion, I've been covering childhood and child rearing specifically from the parental vantage point at various stages. I thought that arc would end with our previous episode, actually 2 episodes ago at this point, In It, with my friends Brandon and Lisa talking about the chaos of raising a toddler and a relatively newborn at the same time. However, then friend of the show John Liot, whose voice you may remember from our frame rate episode on Army of Darkness, he also hosts his own pod, I'm Glad You Exist, reached out with the unfortunate news that he and his wife Annie had just suffered a miscarriage and thought that, hey, the pit might be a good place to unpack some of that, at least as much as is, comfortable for public consumption, in the hopes that it might be a light in the darkness to people going through the same or similar experiences, and just help normalize conversing about miscarriage specifically, but of course all of life's darkest moments, because talking about it helps. Such is the presupposition of this series. So tremendous appreciation, especially to Annie, for being so open and forthcoming about a dark experience that many, many, many human beings go through, more than we like to discuss or admit, unless you're looking at a chart of statistics, and then you probably already knew that. Before we dive into the conversation, which I really enjoyed, I'm going to run a short story here, which I will also warn deals with infant mortality in a pretty gruesome way. If you'd like to skip it, it's about 45 minutes long. It's a long one this time, so feel free to jump ahead if you want. It's completely scored by Davy Francis and also originally appeared in my short story collection No Side, which you can find on the feed if you dig around the archives. This is called The Cost of Living. I'm lying in my bed, wide awake. I'm 7 years old. A summer breeze pushes against the black square of open window and sends the white lace curtains drifting up and down. I'm staring at them, have been for hours. The thick quilt is bunched around my hands as I squeeze the top until my knuckles ache. If I don't keep doing that, I'll die. If I get out of the bed, I'll die. If I move too much, if I cry out, if I do anything, I'll die. I know this. I woke up in a start, sure of it. I was gasping when I woke up. Now, my breathing is normal and shallow, but it still feels like I'm going to pass out from being so awake. My fingers and chest tingle. Mom and Dad are in their bedroom down the hall, but they won't come. I'm begging them to come in my head, but they don't. If I try to call for them. Besides, the last time this happened and I did get them, Dad just said I was being silly and Mom tucked me in again. Try to sleep, she said. Kissed my forehead with hot lips. That was when I realized that they couldn't help me. They can't do anything. We're all going to die. Even Mom and Dad and even me, no matter what I do. I can't cry, though. If I cry, I'll die. I can't stop crying. Hot tears race down my cheeks in wild patterns, evaporating into streaks of salt on my face. I'm breathing quickly and deeply, grimacing and screaming all at once. Push, John says, and it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Of course I'm pushing, goddammit. What does it look like I'm doing? I've got my feet in metal stirrups and I'm pushing and breathing, and the doctor is waiting and smiling. And John, the smartest man I've ever known, is just standing there like a pillar of salt. He's wearing his white scrubs. He works at this very hospital, a floor down, and yet he can't do anything to help. He has to just stand there and watch his wife go through the worst pain she's ever endured. There's a strand of hair in my eyes, a long black one, plastered down with sweat, and it's bugging the shit out of me. push. There's a pressure, like heaving or throwing up, but much stronger, involuntary, almost. I scream through it until it subsides. John grabs my hand and squeezes, and it does help a little, after all. I feel a big one coming, and the doctor says so. "Oh, here comes a big one," he says. I don't know how he knows, and that pisses me off somehow, like he's causing them. But he's right. It is a big one. My butt lifts off the bed as I strain and lurch and push my feet into the metal stirrups. A noise comes out of me that I know I've never made before, ever, like moaning underwater. "It's coming," John whispers. I can feel that too, and I can feel a flood of release that I hadn't felt before growing and spreading up into me. The baby is out. The pressure there is terrible, impossible, like I'm trying to pass a concert hall. "Here we go," says the doctor. "Now we're cooking. Keep pushing, Diana. You're nearly there." He peeks up at me over the mess of my groin and my deflating belly, and I try to kill him with a look. He grins. "It's coming." John is squeezing my hand harder than I'm squeezing his. His wide, smiling eyes are fixed on the doctor's hands working, where I realize the baby's head must be. "It's coming." He chants it like a mantra, laying it under the repeated track of my harsh breathing and aquatic noises. For a long time, I just push and look up at the pea-green ceiling, feeling John's hand on mine and the tidal force of release and the doctor working and the baby. For a long time. Then, when John's hand slips away, I look back down. The doctor's working, but differently now. He's put on one of those masks, I notice, and his brow is furrowed above the triangle of white paper. I don't hear any crying. "What's wrong?" John whispers so that I can't hear, but I can hear. Of course I can hear. There's not a sound in the universe except for John's strained whisper. All of the release that was in me sinks, pulls me down into the damp bed like lead weight. "What?" I say. "What's going on?" I'm crying already. I don't even know what it is yet, and I'm crying. "Diana, just keep pushing now. Just keep doing what you're doing," Dr. Klein says. He turns to John, the white paper mask looking like a demon's grin. "John, page the staff. General Code Blue." John snaps the compact pager off of his belt and strides to the corner of the room, muttering into it as he presses a button. It's pointless for him to try and hide it from me. The message is relayed over the PA system within seconds. "Code Blue, room 213. All available staff and obstetrics, please report. Repeat." I'm still pushing, but there's nothing to push. There's no resistance or pressure, and I know before he does that the doctor is going to scoop my baby up and rush it over to that table over there, the one with the heat lamp and tools and clear plastic box, the one for emergencies only. He's see-through, like glass. That's the first thing I know of him, when the doctor places him on the table. The warm lamplight burns through his miniature torso. Little glass fingers clench and unclench. He's not crying. He stares out at me and his mouth is slack, his grotesquely veined chest barely rising and falling as he sucks air for the first time into shuddering lungs. His eyes are filled with bright red blood, a horrible red that makes me look away from where the doctor is working on my new son. Only he's not working. He's not doing anything. There's nothing to do. And when the other doctors and nurses flood in moments later, they don't do anything either. They just look at each other that way that says, someone's going to have to tell her. And they wheel him out, on the table, my new son. But it's only to get him out of my sight, not to help him. He's beyond help. He's an aberration. John stares after the wheeled table, our son's first car ride, holds my hand. "They're going to run some tests," he says. He squeezes my hand so hard that it hurts, and it says, "I'm lying. I love you and I'm sorry, but I'm lying." "Good," I say. All I want to do right now is sleep. But I don't know if I'll ever be able to sleep again. John squeezes my hand for many minutes until it goes numb and I feel nothing. I use a rubber spatula to ease John's scrambled eggs and cheese from the still sizzling pan onto a baby blue ceramic plate. Also on the plate are 4 sausage links, 2 triangles of sourdough toast with orange marmalade on them, and 8 perfectly equal orange slices. Using the spatula, I nudge the sausages until they're all lined up, and push them in to butt up against the eggs. John likes his breakfast orderly. My nightgown trails after me as I whisk the plate of food out of the kitchen and into the adjoining dining room. The big mahogany table dominates the small room, which used to be a den or solarium or something old-fashioned before we converted it. The table is made of big rough hunks of wood, varnished darkly and supporting 2 set places, one at either end, which puts them about 5 feet apart. I know that this is silly, sitting so far away from each other when there's only the 2 of us, but I enjoy the symmetry of it. I'd always liked the table, which John had inherited from his grandmother. It, to me, was a portent of the large family we were meant to have. Not for a while yet, of course, with the miscarriage, but eventually. John and the doctor hadn't called it a miscarriage, I remember. Complications. My transparent son had died due to complications. I set John's plate down, careful to make no noise. Since I returned from the hospital, everything I do seems to be more secretive, as if I'm trying to be as quiet as possible. I find that little noises irritate me, and I actively try to avoid making them. John hasn't talked about the baby yet, except to say that it would be looked into, that he had every confidence that the hospital staff would figure out what had gone wrong, how to prevent such a thing in the future. John's footsteps make little annoying click noises in the hallway before he appears at the threshold of the dining room. He's in his ash-gray suit, the one with wide lapels and a navy blue tie. He sets his briefcase down as he crosses to me, touching me lightly at the elbow. We stand for a while, saying nothing, by his congealing eggs. "Morning," he breathes. Tender but determined, a practiced voice that I imagine he uses all the time with patients who have undergone complications. I try not to be angry with him. John doesn't deserve that. So I just look at his breakfast, surrounded by plate and silverware and wood, an altered sacrifice to the man who saved my life. "I'm going to take all of my maternity leave," I say. "Or some of it, at least. I hope that won't cause you any problems." John pulls me into him and envelops me with strong arms. "No problem," he says. "Jill can help cover your shifts like we'd planned. It's no problem at all." I notice as John hugs me harder that most of our physical involvement tends to revolve around him squeezing some part of my body. For a moment I panic, like I'm a pig being crushed to death by a boa constrictor in the Amazon. Then I just relax, letting John's boa constrictor arms do their work. He lets go and holds me by the shoulders at a distance the way you'd talk to a child. "How are you? Really?" I smile, just a smear of pig meat getting devoured by a jungle snake. "I'll live," I say. "Your breakfast is getting cold." I don't eat, well, John does. "I'll have some fruit later," I tell him, not sure whether I'm lying. He shovels his food. I noticed it on our first date. Even then, he had been in medical school, a brilliant mind and natural leader. A strong man, too, handsome and sensitive enough to make him irresistible to many women. But he shoveled his food, and I almost broke up with him for it. I thought about it, I never told him. "Great eggs, sweetheart," he says between mouthfuls. "You didn't have to make this." "I always make you breakfast," I say. "I know, but I like making you breakfast." Which is true, I do. John chomps onto a sausage link. "Meeting today?" I ask. He only wears that suit for meetings with the board. He says, some grease dribbling down his chin. "Big one. Talking to some guys, some kooks who are trying to catch us with our pants down. Some kooks." "Why are you talking to them?" "It's their right. They get to tour the offices and equipment. Waste of time, though. Won't get 3 patients in today." John enjoys his work. He wipes his chin and leans back in his chair with a piece of toast. "Well, what's going to happen?" I ask. I'm glad to be talking about something new. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" "Well, you had so much on your plate already." John just holds the toast, poised, marmalade gleaming. He sees the flicker of anger in me, the edge in my voice that means I might be in the mood for a protracted argument. I see that he's going to avoid the confrontation, probably even before he knows he is. He's like a deer. All men are in some ways. You should have told me, I smile. I like to hear about these things. I'm careful not to be angry, just to talk. Sorry. I work there too, you know. I know. Sorry. He crunches into the toast. Crisis averted. In a very real way, I'm disappointed. We haven't fought in ages. All of our conversations are pleasant and cordial, as if the relationship we have at the hospital has somehow clung to us and followed us home. He's a doctor and I'm a nurse, one of many, in his office and now at home too. Neither of us say anything as he finishes his breakfast and wipes the crumbs away with a napkin. The silence is long and unbearably comfortable. I could be naked. It wouldn't make a difference. Stop thinking like that, I tell myself. You're being negative because of the baby. You're looking for reasons to be negative, I think. And then immediately, why the hell shouldn't I be negative? I've lost a child. In the age of life, in the age of medicine, I have lost a child. John's chair rubs and squeals on the floor as he scoots it back and stands. I rise with him, silently. He crosses to me again, hugs me again. He loves me, he says. Do something nice today, he murmurs. Don't just stay in, okay? I nod my head into his chest. His breath stirs my hair. Are you coming in tomorrow for your session? I nod again. I'd never miss a Telres session, no matter what. Okay. He lets me go and snatches up his briefcase. Okay, he says again. I've got to go meet some nutballs. Don't want to be late. He does a silly smile, embarrassing himself for me, making himself harmless. He wants me to smile too, but just this once I can't. He drops the face. I'll see you tonight, sweetheart. He goes out, and I take his plate to the sink to soap it up before the sausage grease can harden. I'm in the Amazon rainforest, hoping to see a boa constrictor. No luck so far. The maglev tour tram I'm riding in trundles through bunches of giant leafy canopies and is subsumed in the sounds of the jungle. Green sounds, bird sounds, sounds of violent life. Monkeys screech when we hover too close to a particular gray-trunked tree or patch of black, loamy ground. We rise and fall slowly, meandering through the jungle while the tour guide's voice politely points out things of interest. The tram is not enclosed, but open on the top and sides like a levitating ferry, and the humidity is stifling. There are only a handful of other passengers on the tour, scattered about in white plastic seats or leaning over the railings to take pictures or point out a particular jungle oddity. There are giant purple flowers bigger than dinner plates growing out of the side of an ancient tree. There's the piercing underwater light that filters down through the dense tangle of leaves 50 yards above us. But there are no snakes. I don't know why, but I want to see one very badly. I can taste the want in my mouth, a little coppery puddle sliding around at the back of my tongue. If I can see a snake, I think, that will be quite a thing. That would be something to tell John about, something to think about that isn't see-through and doesn't have eyes filled with blood. It's been nearly an hour. The tour goes on for another 40 minutes, and then it's back on the passenger skim ship that will take me home again. I'm starting to think boa constrictors aren't native to the Amazon at all, that I've made some sort of ecological error. By the end of the tour, the part where we rise up over the glittering Amazon River itself, I'm one of only 3 people who are still seated. The undulating river below us is apparently the only snake we're going to see, and I'm content to wait for the tram to take us back to our skimship station. The other 2 seated passengers are a row in front of me, a couple of middle-aged women wearing big white straw sun hats and necklaces of wooden beads that I recognize from the Amazon Maglev Tours gift shop. They're engrossed in a conversation that they've been having for some time. Don't even notice the tour guide's lovely prosaic description of the Amazon's infinite majesty. I don't start eavesdropping until I hear one of them say the words, infant mortality. Then, I lean forward in my seat, wanting to have misheard, but wanting also to know that someone else was going through what I was. Shame.
Oh my dear, do they know what's causing it? I don't know. I've only just heard about it this morning. Some sort of epidemic, they say. It's spreading, they say. Really, really. I haven't heard much more about it, but I'm starting to worry about Tandy. She's pregnant, you know. We've sent her in for tests.
The women continue to gab, and I listen, an unknown third member of their clique. Together, we wait for the tram to jolt to a stop on the hot cement of the skimship platform. I walk to the ship in a daze, careful to sit close to the women so I can hear everything, all that they know. I need to be home now, need to be watching the news. I feel like I've failed in missing this information, in missing something I should have known about my son. As the ship lifts off to take me back to New York, I glance down at the Amazon River and imagine it wrapped around the world, squeezing. John is home too, watching the news when I arrive. He's canceled his appointments, he says. He wanted to be here for me when I found out. What I find out is on every channel. It's the new plague, the black canker on the body of the medical era. There's footage of them, all like ours, all transparent and veined and blood-blinded. Ours must have been one of the first, John says. He has an arm wrapped around my shoulders. We're sitting on the white leather couch and I have my legs pulled up into my chest. Maybe the very first. Ours. I think about the names we had argued over. We had never chosen, and then it had become a moot point. I want to have a name to call him by, my glass child, but there is nothing. I shake suddenly, tremors rushing through me. John squeezes tighter. They're everywhere. Someone on the news thinks it's a virus, someone else an environmental mutagen. But what could mothers in Ecuador and France and Siberia all have in common? Why is it the same, everywhere the same? Within the span of a day, infant death has become the rule and healthy birth the exception. Even so, I feel more alone than ever. John and I watch the news all afternoon and into the night when he gets up and makes us some dinner. I stay on the couch and watch mothers from other countries wail and sob in foreign languages and unintelligible moans. They grieve in Spanish and Dutch and Chinese, but I understand them all. John comes back with turkey sandwiches on square plates. "Do you want to turn it off?" he asks. No. I'm shivering again. I feel like a little girl. There's death, spreading, finding a way in the age of immortality to strike us where we're most vulnerable. Okay. He takes a bite of his sandwich. "You should eat, though," he says. "I used honey mustard, like you like." There's a riot later, at the Palace of Westminster at Parliament in England. People throw flaming debris at the building as if it is the beast that is taking their children. I understand. You need that sometimes, when there's no one to blame. John doesn't seem to, though. "What's it going to accomplish?" he says. "Believe me, everyone's going to be working on this as hard as they can. It will get solved. Violence isn't going to help anything." "You think so?" I asked. "Everyone's going to be working on this. All the best minds. They'll figure it out." "I hope so." "Eat your sandwich," he says, nudging the plate toward me. "I slaved over it just for you." I take a sullen bite and swallow. It's sweet and rough. John sighs and watches the TV, the orange glow of bonfires bathing his face. I'm at the hospital for my TelRes session, my telomeric restoration therapy, my TRT. The waiting room is softly white and familiar. Child-friendly furniture huddles in one corner around a toy made of shaped wires and wooden beads. I'm in a blue plush chair, and others identical to it are set around the outside of the small antechamber, all facing the center where a squat glass table boasts neatly stacked issues of Time, People, and highlights for children. Joanne is on desk today, her area separated from this room by a counter and window built into one wall, and her loosely drawn-up bun bounces as she scribbles down the names of people coming in. There are others, but no one talks to me. The television mounted in one corner of the ceiling is on, but muted, and I don't look at it. There are no children. "Diana, John's ready for you," Joanne says. I smile at her, rise, and hurry into the back. I find John in the hallway, waiting to intercept me, with his white doctor's coat and beige folder. My name is printed on the folder, Diana Damick. And John opens it with one hand even as he ushers me into the treatment room with the other. He guides me in, as always, with his hand on the small of my back. This time, for the first time, I wonder if he guides other patients that way. "How are you holding up?" he asks. "Fine. I'm not watching. Has anything happened?" Yes, some things. Sit." John pats the vinyl chair and I hop up onto it, lying back as he reclines it with a foot pedal. "What?" John holds my file open in one hand and scans it for a long time without answering. He gently massages my shoulder with the other hand. "It's nothing," he says, finally. "We'll beat it." "What?" "Oh, it's these activists. And this religious group. It's all legal bullshit, but they've got it on the Senate floor, but it won't pass." John switches on the radiation array machine and starts to calibrate it according to my chart. He swings the giant mechanical arm into place over me, and my reflection in the big glass eye of the lens is warped. "Those guys you met with? The kooks?" "Uh-huh. Well, not them specifically, but like them. Christian idiots overreacting, stirring up trouble. No one listens, of course, but it's given these activists some leverage. They're pushing for a ban." While he talks, John busies himself across the room at a computer. He inserts the flash drive from the little baggy paperclip to my file, and my entire DNA structure begins to scroll past on the screen, too fast by far to be seen. The software does its work. "What would that mean?" I ask. "Would they shut down the office?" "Like I said, it won't pass. There's a bill coming up before the Senate next month, but it won't pass. We're fine. The computer screen prompts John to approve its findings, and he double-checks the genetic information from the scan against my scan from last month. "But if it did, what would we do?" "It won't," he says, coming back to the chair with the flash drive and inserting it. "You have to stay still, sweetheart." I realize now that I'm trembling and grip the purple armrests as hard as I can. John presses a button, and the parabolic lens waiting above me springs into action, its mechanical arm guiding it up and down my body like a cycloptic voyeur. There is no light, but I feel the selective radiation like a shower of soap bubbles hitting my skin wherever the eye goes. The particles it emits are binding to my DNA, lengthening my telomeres to match last month's recording, which matched the month before that, and before that, all the way back to 30 years ago when John gave me my first treatment as our wedding gift. I had feared death, and he took that fear away. He saved my life every month, promised me an existence that would not end until I wanted it to. It was the new miracle, the real fountain of youth, TRT, the anti-aging wonder that had sparked the medical revolution and the age of health, the process I had married into, and which had finally given me peace. And now it might be over, might be banned. As the eye finishes its work and removes itself from my field of vision with a mechanical whirring noise, I start to shake again. I'm in bed, 7 years old, and I can't move. If I move, I'll die. "Sweetheart," says John, laying a hand on mine. "You're all done." John is right, the bill doesn't pass. But there is no cure either, and the children continue to die with blood in their eyes. It's a month since my own baby died, and there is no cure, no understanding of the new plague other than the unsubstantiated theories of those seeking fame and the dire condemnations of those who, as someone always does, claim Armageddon. John and I are at home, on opposite ends of the couch. I have noticed this drift away from me, but done nothing. The symmetry is nice anyway. On television, analysts discuss the ramifications of the bill's failing. Of course, Richard Deemer is mentioned, and his pocked cheeks and bad toupee are plastered onto the screen while he yells at a growing crowd of religious followers. "TRT is the work of the sinful man," burst blood vessels making his face flushed and ugly. "And God has sent down his judgment upon us." A cheer goes up from the thousands gathered at the Washington reflecting pool. Richard Deemer silently dabs at his forehead with a handkerchief while the overdubbed voice of a commentator discusses the possible fallout from the series of mass rallies he's organized. "Nut job," John says, changing the channel. "He just makes these poor people feel worse, like it's their fault their children are making it." All that's on is more news, so John turns it off. The lights in the living room come up dimly in response, and John and I sit in the heavy silence. "Diana." "Yes?" John doesn't look at me when he speaks. His words are smooth and his body limp. "I'm so sorry. We haven't talked enough." I almost act like I don't know what he means. Then, "Yes, we have. It's okay." "No. I miss him. I need you to know that. I think about him every second." "I know. Me too." "I love you. I want to try again I want to have a baby with you, Diana." "I know." "I love you." John falls toward me and lays his head in my lap. I put a hand on his head, in his brown hair, and I just leave it there. "Do you think it will?" I ask. "Do you think it will get better?" Richard Deemer sways on stage in a polyester jacket. "Man is not meant to be immortal," he says. "Yes, I do. They're all working on it. The best minds." "There are more riots every day," I say. "We are stealing time from God, and in his wisdom he is reclaiming what we have stolen," says Richard Deemer. "They take care of that," says John. "They're police. They take care of that." "Telres must be destroyed," shouts Richard Deemer. "God demands it." The crowd goes wild. "We should make love," says John. "You're so beautiful. We haven't since." "I think I'm going to ask for a little more time off from work," I say. "Would that be all right?" "We should make love," says John again, looking up at me. "No," I whisper, "not tonight." I stroke his hair with my hand. "I'm tired." In the morning, John and I don't speak at all except for him telling me to go ahead and take as much time as I need, and reminding me that I have another Telres session in a few days. We both eat cereal in the living room and watch a cartoon. Then he goes and I watch the news. The bill failed, but all of the news anchors and analysts and commentators are still talking about it. PBS somehow managed to put together a documentary already. TRT, Cure or Curse. It's nothing but a lot of scientists talking about how really no one knows anything yet. All kinds of people in suits argue that some unknown vector in TRT is killing children, and other people in other suits throw out alternate hypotheses. A novel virus, a sudden mutation, the second coming. But most people seem to have agreed. Telres is to blame. Without any direct link, without any evidence, but with nothing better to explain it, people unanimously fall on Telres. Every so often, there's even the occasional shot of Richard Deemer and his followers. He's held rallies all over the country, and each one bigger and more desperate. The bill failed, but all of the news anchors and analysts and commentators are still talking about it. PBS somehow managed to put together a documentary already. TRT, Miracle or Curse? I decide to go out only when I can't stand it anymore. When the news is all just the same, and there is nothing more that can be said about the tragedy except to cry again, which in the end never helps. So I go out. The afternoon sky is huge and on fire. I think of snakes and giant purple flowers. I try to let the snake unwind, to breathe in without feeling constraint. I am blues and greens. Not all, but a little at least. I drive the car around the neighborhood, stop at the park to eat, and am on my way home when the crowd stops me. There are hundreds of people, of all ages, and they completely block the road. They carry signs on their bodies and fear and desperation on their faces. I could go around, except that cars are backed up behind me, drivers and passengers getting out and abandoning their vehicles to join the throng. Then I see why. On a makeshift platform, Richard Deemer is preaching. A few police scatter the periphery, but do nothing. A cloud of reporters jostle through the crowd with cameramen in tow, trying to catch snatches of the man's speech. This one is different. Deemer is proud, triumphant. A microphone picks up his voice and amplifies it. I roll down a window to listen.
Today God's work will be done,
Deemer says, arms outstretched, kerchief dangling from one hand despite the cool of the late afternoon.
Today the Senate will know our will, and we shall be delivered from the new plague by the grace of God Almighty.
The crowd cheers, and in real life it sounds nothing like on TV. Now it sounds loud and real and powerful, like an ocean, hard and unforgiving as only a mob can be.
The government has ignored our pleas and ignored the will of God,
says Deemer, waving his arms like he's hailing a distant rescue ship.
And we must take up arms to defend the righteous from this plague of radiation.
Deemer slams his fist into his leg with each word as he shouts,
Go, purge the sin from this city.
This is his finale, and he grins with all of his pearly teeth as the cheers of the mob envelop him. The people that were holding signs now hold sticks, bottles, pieces of metal. I look in the rearview mirror but see no way to get out of the traffic jam that's formed behind me. People honk and shout and start to disperse, while police radio and make their way to the stage, to Deemer. John is still at work. I'm 14 blocks away from the hospital, from his offices. If I wait until the crowd is thin enough to drive through, it will be night. I curse myself for leaving my cell phone on my bedside table. I haven't carried it in weeks. I haven't gone out in weeks. The crowd reaches my car, and angry faces stream by the window. Men and women, mothers and fathers, carry knives and bricks, some Bibles. One old man carries an ancient rifle. No one stops to look at me as I get out of the car and start to move toward the sidewalk. There are people going in every direction, some toward, some away from the stage. I hear glass smashing and know that whatever's going to happen has begun. I stop to slip off my uncomfortable shoes and run barefoot across the cooling asphalt. I can hardly breathe at first, my stomach tight and my side on fire, running as fast as I can past shouting men and women. After a while, I start to breathe regularly and deeply, the fire spreading to my throat and into my lungs. My feet are bleeding by the time I turn the corner toward the hospital. By the time I'm there, to the crowd that's surging into the double doors at the front, my feet are numb like bricks. I've dropped my shoes. I don't remember where. There is black smoke curling from the roof of the hospital. I can see fire in many of the windows. Suddenly, a hospital bed is hurled from one of the windows on the 4th floor and crashes to the ground, a twisted and useless hunk of metal. It is night now. I can't get into the front. There are dozens of people there. Most are just milling around, watching or else idly smashing anything that isn't smashed. The automatic doors are both bent, so they can't open all the way. Instead, people have broken the glass out of them and climbed through there. I rush to the side of the hospital, the big metal door that says employees only. I punch in a code and open the door. Someone sees me and shouts to the others, but I slam the door and hear it relock before they can get to me. Once inside, I stop, pressed up against the door. My heart pounds and my head aches. My feet, no longer numb, send shooting pains up my calves and into my knees. I'm in the loading dock. There is no one here, just stacks of crates and medical equipment. I don't see anyone as I cross to the service elevator, get out on the 3rd floor, and approach the door that opens into John's suite of offices. John's name is not on the directory outside the door. It's been ripped off. Some of the tiles in the hallway are smashed, and lights shower sparks down where they've been broken open. Before I open the door, I can hear the shouting inside. Someone bursts into the room from the offices. He's carrying one of the light boxes they use to review x-rays. He looks at me, soot-faced, then pushes past me and out into the hallway. Now that he's opened the door to John's office, I can hear the crackling of a fire and more angry shouts. I cross to the door and hold it open, looking down the hall. There are 5 people, all bunched outside of the filing room at the end. They're shouting, and a large man at the front of the group is banging on the door. The treatment room on the left is filled with flames, dancing in the lens of the radiation array machine. "Let us in, monster," the big man shouts. "You can't stop us from burning this abomination." He slams his shoulder up against the door, but has trouble getting a good start because of the others crammed in around him. But the door is giving. I can see the wood around the hinges starting to splinter. My legs become weak as I try to take a step forward. I don't even know if John's in there. I should go. I should run away and go home, and John will be waiting there for me to cook dinner. The man takes another run at the door, and it begins to bow, the frame splitting apart.
Another man in the group hefts a can of gasoline and unscrews the cap. "We'll burn you if we have to," says the leader, backing up to kick at the locked door. I try to move but can't. I see the desperate people ahead of me and the death they promise if I interfere, if they even hear me. I can't move or make a sound. I can't scream like I want to, can't run away or advance. I can't, but I have to. I can't move or I'll die, but I do. The heat in the treatment room is incredible. As I step into it, out of sight of the mob, flames are climbing the wooden cabinetry and melting plastic jars on the counter. The floor sears at the bottoms of my feet. I run to the door on the other side of the room, feeling my hair curl up and sweat boil off of my skin as soon as it forms. The door opens into another office, and I fall inside, laying only for a moment before the pain from the heat becomes bearable and I can struggle back to my feet. I'm in the nurse's break room. It is looted, broken, but empty. Another door takes me to the hall we share with Dr. Sprague, and from there I find the door I'm looking for, the record room's alternate entrance. I bang on it. John, it's me." It's only a moment before John opens the door. First, I don't even recognize him. His face is like I've never seen it. Sweat beads on his forehead and his eyes are wild. Then suddenly, I realize it's the first time I've ever seen John afraid. He hurtles toward me, his savior, arms outstretched as if grasping for a lifeline. His fear makes me feel strong, adrenaline coursing through me where I thought there was nothing left but pain. I even have to fight back a laugh. Behind him, I watch the main door to the records room splinter and explode, the big man spilling into the space. "Diana," John gasps. Before he can say another word, I've grabbed him by the hand and we're sprinting down the hall. We're all the way to the hospital's rear fire escape before we realize we have not been followed. John is panting. "They've burned the files. Everyone's files." "It's okay," I say. "Are all the nurses okay? Where's Joanne?" "Everyone ran out," says John, climbing out the window onto the metal escape. "I stayed to protect the files." "Stupid," I say. "That was years of work. Impossible to replace." He helps me out onto the ledge, and the metal grating feels like razors on my scorched and lacerated feet. "Just take me home," I say. "Let's just go home." The power is out, and it's pitch black except for a single candle John dug out of a box in the garage. We can't watch the news, and we can't turn on the lights, and it's night. We're on the white couch. John is bandaging my feet. "You're incredible," he says. "Thank you. You saved my life." "Oh, it was nothing," I say. I'm focusing on breathing regularly. I'm focusing on being alive. John finishes and sits down next to me. I can only see him as a soft yellow ghost, but I hear his voice fill the room like my husband. "I have something for you," he says. "What?" I ask. I hear John fumble with his coat. "Give me your hand." He pushes something small, cold, and rectangular into it. I clutch it instinctively like a security blanket. I'm suddenly very glad of the dark. I don't want John to see me crying. "It's your flash drive," he says. "Diana Damick. When this is all over, you'll still have your files. You can go to another clinic and you can still get treatments." I don't say anything for so long. John reaches out to make sure I'm still there. "Thank you," I say. But I don't think I should keep it. "What?" John chuckles. "Of course you should. I saved it for you." I think we should get rid of it. This is much harder than the mob or the fire. This is much worse, hurts more. This is my baby dying in front of me again. This is watching myself die. And so I don't really know what to say, or why I say, "I want to destroy it." "But I saved it. I didn't even have time to get mine. I just got yours." "Please." I lay a hand on John's forearm. "No," says John. "We're not going to be afraid of these zealots." It's not that. The couch squeaks as John shifts his weight and leans out of the spare ring of light. His voice seems harsher for the fact that I can't see him. "Don't tell me you believe this Armageddon bullshit, Diana. These people are rioters. The new plague is going to be cured. Don't give this up thinking it's going to save our children, because it's not." "Telres must be destroyed," shouts Richard Deemer. "God demands it." It's not that, I say. A long silence. I'll do what you want to do, says John coldly. It feels good to be in a fight again. Then destroy it, I say. John grunts as he gets up, snatches it out of my hand, drops it to the floor, and steps on it. Little green plastic shards and metal divots gleam in the candlelight. I hope we don't regret that, John says, flopping back down onto the couch. My eyes snap open. I am wide awake. For a moment, I don't even know how old I am. I don't know anything. Then I do know. I know that I had a baby, that it died staring at me through blood. I know I've been through fire and glass, been cut and bruised. I know more than I know anything else that I am going to die. That John can't help me. That he can't do anything. That he is going to die too, and so am I, and so is Richard Deemer and everyone in his mob. My heart throws itself against my chest, and I can't breathe except by hyperventilating. If I get out of the bed, I'll die. If I move too much, if I cry out, if I do anything, I'll die. I know this. Sweetheart, John says, his speech slurred by grogginess. What's wrong? I feel the warmth of his body push against me. The millions of tiny hairs on his chest and legs brush against my cold skin. What's the matter? He must have heard me breathing. I'm embarrassed and still frightened. John lays a hand on my stomach and I can feel his breath against my ear. What's wrong, Diana? And for a moment, he is like a boa constrictor, wrapped around me, hissing. But then it fades and he is John and I am Diana again. I breathe deep. I was scared, I say. I got scared. Don't be scared, he says, and his voice is like a candle flame that wards off the dark. It's simple and stupid and ridiculous, but it helps. It helps. Okay, I say. I won't be. Good, says John. Anything else wrong? Nothing, I say. Breathing deeply and letting my heart slow. I roll over on top of him, and soon we're making love, with a passion only the mortal and doomed can have, and he is careful of my feet.
To start today with something that honestly would have broken the ice if I'd done it. Well, we were figuring out technical bullshit, so I guess it didn't matter. But, you know, normally when you meet people, you'd be like, and how are you doing? But I feel like I was like, I'll save that for on mic because I think an emotional check-in is useful for the journey we're about to embark upon. So what kind of energy, if I may ask, are you guys coming in with? Like, just how are you today in the most general sense?
Depressed.
Depressed, yeah? Appreciate you being honest about that. This is the right place for that.
I would say I'm doing all right, but I work in schools, so it's half term at the moment, so I've just been given a week off, and that feels like an absolute blessing. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah, kind of coming up for air is how I would present that.
Great. Well, people who listen to everything we drop will recognize John's voice, but Annie, thank you. And I appreciate you starting out the gate with depressed, and also need to point out that this whole time we've been juggling, you have been juggling Bluetooth connections while I patiently sit. It's interesting just how we never can tell what's going on with someone in their interior because you've been witty and sparkling, and I'm like, oh, just what a fun person to meet. Okay, now let's talk about how we're really depressed, which is perfect. That's what we do here. And speaking of which, I want to talk about, we're here to discuss miscarriage, and even that, saying that, it's like, in the slightest sense, I get the little tinge of, do you, or like, is that a word you're not supposed to say? You know what I mean? And it's interesting in my talking with people about it. I think the normalization is still not there. And I was Googling right before this. It's like 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage, or roughly 20. Is this, can you correct me, please?
Closer to 1 in 3.
This is just a guiding path for you to take over. So please take over.
Closer to 1 in 3.
Closer to 1 in 3. Well, so that's the thing is every person I've talked to who's gone through miscarriage or even just pregnancy all love to talk about how no one will want to talk about it. And Annie, did you find that did you feel that pressure? And I'm just wondering what sort of shape that took in your mind. Is it just not wanting to put that much set trauma out into the world, or, did you keep it private?
No, we didn't keep it private at all. And we shared our pregnancy from day one that we found out, because in 2020 I had cervical cancer. So I knew I was a high miscarriage risk. I knew there was a high chance that I wouldn't be able to conceive at all. So we decided to celebrate every day regardless of the length of the pregnancy.
Right. Good attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are, we're about to hit 3rd trimester, me and my wife, and they definitely were the opposite for the very same reason. They were like, because we're geriatric pregnancy, which raises your percentage quite a bit. And to all you people who are 25, and I remember being 25 and being like, 40 is a whole lifetime away. You'll be 40, you'll be like, I'm not geriatric, screw you. But I think it's over 35, right, as a geriatric pregnancy.
Yep.
Yeah. It increases the odds, and so that's that's sort of an interesting decision. Did you always both, like, what made you decide now's the time in life that we want to really give it a shot? Have you been trying for a while? You mentioned, either was it like difficulty conceiving or a chance that, you know what I mean? Like, you'd either conceive or you wouldn't, or did you have difficulty conceiving over time?
So we didn't know how it was going to go. There was a possibility that I wouldn't be able to conceive at all because of the surgery that I've had on my cervix.
Mm-hmm. And was that successful?
Yes, it was. I am cancer-free.
Treating cancer? Well, that's great to hear.
Yeah. So in June, I got off my birth control, and in July, we found out we were pregnant.
Darn. Yeah. I believe our 2nd month of trying, it stuck, which was interesting because we similarly, for a different set of medical reasons, my wife was like, I don't think we'll even get pregnant, or I imagine it will take a year or year and a half. It's like, start buying cribs, people.
Well, we were...
So, yeah, go ahead, John.
We were in Seattle when we found out, because Annie was like on the ovulation apps and all that stuff, like kind of tracking it immediately. And because of the time difference from Jersey to Seattle, the way the app had kind of come out was, oh, your period is a day late. So the people we were staying with just so happened to have a pregnancy test. So it was like, oh, let's take one. So Annie takes one, comes out of the bathroom. It's just like, I can't go in to go and look at it. You go and look at it. And I'm thinking, you know what? Let's not get our hopes up. It's, literally first time trying. But I had this sense of like, I think I'm about to find something out. So I'm like, right, I need to use the bathroom now. It's been a few minutes. I'll go in. And I was like, I won't look straight away. Obviously, the first thing I did was look. And I reckon I looked at the test like about 8 times to be like, it's 2 lines, yes. Like reading it. It's the most simple instructions. I'm like, oh shit, like this is positive. And yeah, just like coming back through and showing it to Annie, like, I don't know what I said. Or
he walked out holding the pregnancy test, smiling, and I said, "Did you read it right?"
And instantly I was like, maybe I didn't. Let me check once more.
I mean, yeah, experience with a pregnancy test, but also even just COVID test, where you're like, so they use the lines. I'm looking at figure A. Is there any chance it's misprinted? No, that's the caption of figure A. It looks like that line. I don't have COVID, honey. Like, yeah, same deal. I walked by, just reversed roles, and they were like, Can you read this? Is this true that it's this fast?
Yeah.
Can I ask each of you, where you land on the spectrum of, on one end, I've always wanted to produce and raise offspring with a laser passion since I was young, or, if it happens, it happens. In the middle too, I never thought I'd have kids, and here we are.
I think for me, I've always been attached to the idea of having kids. I think just accepting it as, whilst it's not prescriptive, it made sense for me as like the milestones of life, of going, at one point I'll be an adult, I'll have my own place, I'll have a job, all that stuff, and at one point I'll have kids, I'll be a dad, I'll be a granddad, the set menu of life.
And do you own a home?
No, I don't own a home, but
Boom.
not too many people in Jersey do. So
Feel free to donate.
But
we'll just sidestep that one for now and get to the child rearing milestone. Yeah.
But I think as soon as I got into my 30s, I was like, I'm ready for this to happen. I've said this to Annie, like, since we met, really, that there was one thing on my bucket list that I needed to do before I could feel comfortable going full tilt into parenting. And that was going to Japan. And we're we're going to Japan in December. And as far as I'm concerned, once that's done, because I could never imagine us doing that for the first time for both of us going there with a child. And even whilst Annie was pregnant, was a little bit like, oh, is this going to be the same kind of, will we be able to enjoy ourselves? So it's, for me, once that's done, it's like, that's what my big goal in life is raising children. Not that couldn't change. I mean, that's what this experience has kind of had to bring into the light a little bit, is the best intentions and the best plans can not work out. But yeah, I think we'll touch on more of that in a bit. But yeah, that was my connection to child rearing, I suppose.
I'm the sixth of 7 of my mother's children.
Okay.
And I wasn't raised by her, but I always thought I would have children. And then I think I'm a recovered alcoholic, and in the height of my alcoholism, I was like, I'm never going to get there. So nothing fucking matters, because I've got nothing for posterity's sake. Like, if I'm not going to have kids, then I don't need to worry about like preserving myself in any way. And I just kind of really let loose. But when I got sober, that dream came back, and I ended up sidestepping it for a while for a person who I was with. And then I got cervical cancer, and the possibility of losing my fertility made me realize how much I truly did want to be a mother, and that I was sacrificing it for someone else, Right. In the end, they dumped me. Oh, well. But after that, I was like, all right.
They're not on this podcast.
They're going to listen to this. Shout out to that person. But after that, I had a lot of time to myself and casual things, but I knew if I was in a relationship, I knew that's what I wanted. I wanted marriage. I wanted stability. I wanted children. And as soon as John and I got to the point of like, are we really doing this? I was like, listen, this is what I want. He wanted the same things. Cool. We're not wasting anybody's time.
She did discuss. Cool.
But I had to have the conversation as well of, I might not be able to carry a child myself. I had cancer, so we discussed that, because it's like, well, what does that mean if I can't? And we're on that journey now. So the miscarriage actually was not related to the cancer. So my cervix is competent, which is great, because after those surgeries... Is that
what they call it?
Yeah, they say you have incompetent cervix. They're horrible.
Yeah, well, you're geriatric and your vagina's incompetent, so I don't know what you want from me. It's like, nicer. You could be nicer.
we spoke to some friends who'd been through miscarriages, and that was part of the journey of grief within this, was connecting with people who'd also been through it, and it's a surprising number of people. But a friend, his wife's womb was just
hostile.
A hostile womb, which is, again, I don't know why, but it makes me think of like
cervix, hostile
Space
womb.
Invaders or something. hostile womb.
Yeah.
Well, your diaphragm's stupid, so what are we gonna do?
Yeah, it's pretty brutal to be being hit with these terms and just be like, oh man, like I've got quite a lot of emotional attachment to the idea of having kids, and then people just kind of throw out these words like,
well, especially once you work up whatever mental process you need to spin up to go like, it's real now. Wow, I really am ready, and we're doing it. And then to have that ambition frustrated is the gentlest way you could say it. But I just real quick before I transition, I wanted to ask, what are your relationship stats? How long we've been together? When did you start living together, etc.?
We've been together 2 years this past July. We've
Congrats.
been married since this past April. And
Nice.
we've been living together since April of 2023.
Okay. I don't know if the third one was too invasive. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah.
But,
We're like accelerated track. I had to move to another country to be with him. So
That was for storytelling context. I'm gonna like, okay, so quickly, but not too. I mean, 2 years is 2 years. So I wanted to sadly take us from that moment of discovering the pregnancy to how did it unfold when you discovered the pregnancy was to fail? Was it a surprise? If I can take you back to that moment.
So weirdly, I had a dream in August. I could pull up the text message to my friend. I had a dream that I had taken another pregnancy test.
I'm not going to accuse you of fabricating.
It was flashing on the little pregnancy test screen, pregnancy failing. And in my dream, I was going, no,
Wow.
no. What do I do? How can I stop it? And this voice said, there's nothing you can do. It's over. And I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I just had the freakiest dream. I called the midwives, who I hadn't met yet because they don't meet with you until you're 12 weeks pregnant. So I called the midwives, call. I'm at work. My work doesn't know I'm pregnant. I'm still on probation. I'm new at this job, so I can't answer the call when they do call back. Long story short, I don't get a hold of the midwives. I don't think they would scan me based on a dream anyway. But I left them this voicemail like, I had cervical cancer. I actually had a miscarriage as a teenager as well. So I was trying to be like, I'm a sensitive case. Help me.
Or high risk. Yeah.
Yeah. I got home and I took another pregnancy test and it was positive. And I was like, okay, you know what? It's just a dream. What I didn't know is that your pregnancy hormones can continue on for weeks and weeks, and your placenta and the sac that the embryo's in can continue to grow.
We'll give you a false positive. I see.
Yeah. So I woke up. It's 2 months tomorrow. I woke up.
Wow.
And there was
fresh.
blood.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because it's like the day's quite patchy, but there are certain bits that are like seared into my mind and I kind of keep going back to. But basically, I guess it's difficult to have this conversation without being like, trigger warning, like talking about blood and stuff,
At this point in the episode, there has been a trigger warning that they've heard as well.
So that day, the Saturday. Just kind of throughout the day, Annie was kind of talking about how she was feeling pain in her abdomen, in her stomach. And there was the presence of blood. And it was like, is this bad? Like, any blood seems like that's too much blood. Fortunately, my mother used to be a sexual health nurse. So she's like on speed dial for anything to do with women's issues. So she's just like, straight away, like, no, this could be completely normal. This can happen, spotting, all that stuff. But didn't feel like spotting, like even the description of what spotting is, it was like...
It was spotting in the beginning.
Yes.
So I called the midwives. I called his mom. Both of them were like, put your feet up. Stay on the couch today. Don't panic. But if it gets worse, go to the hospital. If it doesn't get worse, just relax. Just put your feet up. They're really chill about it.
So it wasn't like the two lines appearing. It was like a limbo almost for a while.
Yeah. So I spent the day on the couch. John had a wedding to go shoot. So he went.
Annie, but we're like, because of your dream being so powerful, were you feeling, I don't know what the case is going to be, or were you feeling like, I know my body, I know something bad has happened? What kind of state were you in?
When I saw the blood, it was like first thing in the morning. I'd slept in, it was like 10 a.m. I slept in hard, woke up, saw the blood. John's on the couch. I walk out and I couldn't even say the words before I started crying. I'm bleeding, just sobbing immediately. And now John has PTSD if I pause in that doorway to say something.
Yeah, like genuinely, it's like at that tone of voice, as soon as she said it, was like something really serious is happening. Like, regardless of knowing what the context was, it was like clear that Annie was like struggling with something. And me just sat there kind of playing on my PlayStation, and then all of a sudden being in full alert mode was like, and I think the thing is,
that'll stick with you. That's like the season finale moment of a really grim, good HBO show.
Oh yeah.
A woman comes out and says, "I'm bleeding." You're like,
well,
oh fuck.
and because effectively the miscarriage, I don't know what, like the length of the first part of it, I suppose, was Saturday from that moment all the way through to Monday evening when you were you sleeping back here on Monday?
Yeah, I was back here on Monday.
Yeah, so if we just say Saturday to Monday, from that point, it was like I was in high alert the entire time. And it's that aspect to dealing with a miscarriage that I think people don't quite understand, maybe from the male perspective, because I've certainly felt a lot of guilt about going, do I have a right to be emotionally upset? Nothing's happened to my body, and I've lost like the abstract idea of a child. And I don't know if it's just you as a man, like you kind of turn those things in on yourself, but in thinking about it more and reflecting on it, it's like for several days I was just in full trying to do whatever I could to help, managing the reality of what was happening and allowing the lovely idea of what was going to happen to kind of go, that's not going to happen now.
We didn't know. So Saturday I'm laying on the couch trying to relax and make it through the day with just spotting. And I mean, like, lots of details here, people. Sorry. There's nothing on my panty liner. I put a panty liner in my undies. It's just when I wipe. And I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe it really is like my mother-in-law said, you know what? You're only 10 weeks. It could still be implantation bleeding, which is, the embryo digging into your womb. So it can really attach. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really reassuring. I didn't realize that could happen so late. I'm starting to like calm myself down. And then 10 p.m. rolls around and there's like real blood. So I send a picture to my mother-in-law. I'm like, hey, do you mind if I send you a picture? Send it. And she's like, yeah, it's time to go to A&E. We get in the car. I put on my favorite meditation. I'm upset. Probably crying the whole time. We get to A&E. They, bring me into the little side room, ask me some questions, crack some jokes, calm me down, bring us into the back. And they drew my blood. They put an IV in me. They said, your hemoglobin's fine, so you're fine. You're either miscarrying or you're not. If you are, there's nothing we can do. Go home.
Wow. There's no definitive.
They couldn't. Wow. Here's the thing. There is. There very much is very definitive ways to know.
So is this a classic failure of the medical system, or what? What was the fuckery here? Why did this moment happen?
Because it was outside of office hours.
Oh boy. Okay.
So in America, it's not like that. I've been to the ER on the weekend, and I've had a transvaginal ultrasound.
Yeah. Many times.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I haven't done that many times. But
Yeah, probably.
Other analogous things. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was shocked. I kept asking for a scan, and they're like, it's not an emergency. We're not going to scan you. Go home. So they said, if it gets worse, come back.
Because you're not going to die from it, or like we verified it won't damage you.
So they haven't verified that. That's the issue. It could have been an ectopic pregnancy. They didn't check, right? Ectopic pregnancies can kill women and do kill women.
Yes, that I'm aware. But okay. So when they drew your blood and said, you're fine.
Yeah, because
That's sort of an overstatement.
because my hemoglobin was fine, so I wasn't internally bleeding yet.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. So through whatever Kafkaesque lens of you checked off the boxes of their like, and you can cut her loose because we checked off this box.
Yep. So
Is what we're driving at. Yeah.
yeah. So they send us home.
I'm so sorry.
Do you want to tell part of the story?
No, you're better at it.
Okay. So they send us home. We try to go to sleep. Maybe John fell asleep. I don't know. But what I now realize, I start having contractions. Like full blown awful pain. And the bleeding's getting worse.
Yeah.
And at 4 a.m., it was 3:30 a.m. I have a text to a friend because my friends are in America. They're awake at 3:30 a.m., right? It's daytime over there. I text a friend, the contractions have gotten worse and I've started losing consciousness. John has called the ambulance.
Oh my God. Whoa.
So I got up to go to the bathroom, started losing consciousness, tried to get up again, started losing consciousness. And yeah, so he called the ambulance. I was able to finally make it to the bathroom without fainting, but then I started vomiting, which is also a symptom of ectopic pregnancies. For me, I think it was the pain. Do you want to try to tell a little bit of it?
Well, so ambulance crew arrives. They take us back to A&E. A&E take us through to this little tiny back room thing that's just a really dark, dismal room. No windows or anything, about the size of a closet. Annie's on the bed, just kind of writhing in pain. I'm sat next to her. And it's like, it's 4 a.m. Our bodies are all over the place.
Right.
And I think at that point we enter this kind of like limbo state where we're there for many hours.
We had lots of doctors and nurses come in. A gynecologist doctor, I think in my exit paperwork it says I talked to Dr. Pringle. So I assume that's the doctor. So he comes in and I look at him and I said, "Is it time for me to give up hope?" And he said, "No, don't give up hope until you have your scan on Monday." Oh, by the way, before they kicked us out the first time, they said, "You'll have a scan on Monday." When the ward is open that does the scans.
Yeah. At 9 to 5 or whatever.
Yep. During
After we
office
get our
hours.
Donuts and coffee.
Yeah,
Get
right.
in
After
line,
we
we'll see
have a
what we
full
can do.
night's sleep, we're nice and rested.
Yeah.
So he says, "Don't give up hope." He leaves. I'm in so much pain. I used to do extreme sports. I broke my face skateboarding. I've broken 11 bones. I grew up neglected, walked around on broken bones. My pain scale is whack. So a nurse comes in and says, "What's your pain scale out of 10?" And I said, "Listen, that question doesn't work for me. I grew up neglected. I grew up walking around on broken bones." And she's like, "What?" And I was like, "I'm going to tell you, I'm in 10 out of 10 pain. I know I'm not screaming, but I am." And what I was doing,
handle pain is all.
I was
seeing
laying
here.
there,
Yeah.
deep breathing, trying to meditate my way out of the pain. And literally, at one point, I was laying there, and my mother-in-law looks over because I'm whispering something, and I'm whispering, "Relax, relax, relax, relax." Every contraction I had, I tried to relax my entire body because I couldn't stop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and you know, in hindsight, looking back at this, the most frustrating thing was Annie was doing absolutely everything she could to almost, delay what was happening, as if, if I really fight for this, I'll be able to turn the tide of the miscarriage happening, or pre-miscarriage, save the pregnancy and all that. And knowing that it was a miscarriage that was well on its way, all of that energy was just being spent making it
You don't
last
need
longer.
to be in your head about if there's a sequence of things I can do between now and then that will avert the disaster. It's like,
Yeah.
You don't even need
Instead-
that in your head.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's like, so with Dr. Pringle saying, don't give up hope.
so
Obviously,
easy for him to be like, "Oh yeah, keep trying. I don't care. Yeah, try."
but it's
hard, sure.
so him saying don't give up hope, obviously to us at that moment felt amazing, because it's like, okay, cool,
Yeah, he's
we're
the
still
authority
in
figure.
right now. This could just be a nightmare, but it could also, we could come out the other side of this. We've still got a pregnancy. It's just part of the journey. But actually, if they had just done the scan and gone, yeah, there's nothing to save at this stage, then Annie can at the very least be like, lean into the contractions, go with it.
Get that stuff out that had to come out in the end anyway.
It's like
You don't
stopping
even
yourself
know.
from vomiting by going like, oh, I'll just keep swallowing, and therefore I'm not being sick.
Because they're like, in 48 hours we'll tell you if you've been poisoned. Or
Yeah,
just-
exactly,
And you're like,
exactly.
but I need to throw up or not throw up. I can't.
Yeah. And it's so frustrating because my
Brutal.
body was doing the right thing, but I was so afraid, and I wanted to. Right? Like
I was gonna say, I don't even think that that's too far fetched that the dream was a thing. I do
so that's
think that your body knows a lot about your pregnancy situation.
So what I learned after our horrible time in the A&E with all the contractions, it was so bad they put me on morphine straight into my vein.
Wow.
And at this point, it's September 1st, which is the 6-month mark of my sobriety birthday. So I was 8.5 years sober. And I said, I'm 8.5 years sober and I have morphine going straight into my vein. And I laughed.
Yeah.
I was like, happy half year to me. I've made it 8.5
'cause I've
years and I'm fucked
I've-
out of my mind.
Well, I've done a bunch of different substances, but not morphine. Does it overlap with being drunk? Is it like a similar feel to drunkenness?
Have you ever taken too many painkillers for fun?
No, but not for lack of trying. I never have a bunch. I think it's because I wear rainbow tie-dye Alex Gray art shit. But I have other friends who are sitting on. I'm like, all the Adderall that's missing, my friend has it, and he does not have ADD. And I do have ADD, but they won't give me Adderall because I'm a freak.
Yeah, I was very high, and I told that to John and his mom. I was like, I'm high. I was like, I can still feel pain, but I don't care as much because
Sure.
I'm high.
Yeah. That's just being high.
My mother-in-law.
Did that throw a wrench in your sobriety?
No,
Afterwards?
because I was following the doctor,
After
and like
8 years,
they
that's when,
sent
like,
they sent
okay.
me home. They sent me home with codeine. I didn't take any of it.
Yeah.
Um,
You're a pro at this point.
Yeah, like, and I am a part of a program that has a book that has rules, and in that book it says we believe in doctors. We listen.
Like your
we listen.
life is in danger.
We
you can
listen
take
to
a
our
thing. Yeah.
friends, the doctors. If you'd like me to pull out the
Yeah.
page, I will. If anybody wants to come at me, feel free. I've fought off lots of people about sobriety. Like,
Sure.
doctors are our friends. We shall follow their guidelines, But no, it didn't interrupt my sobriety. It got me through one of the worst nights of my life.
Well, and there was a point when we were originally down in A&E, or in A&E the second time, where, basically every time Annie goes off to the bathroom, I'm helping her get there. And also because the blood is a persistent thing, and it's almost like we were told, this is good blood versus this is bad blood. So I didn't want Annie to just be like there on her own experiencing that. So I'm there with her each time, going to the bathroom just as moral support. But it gets to the stage where Annie's her heart rate, her blood pressure is dropping like quite a lot. Like she's on the CT monitor scanner, whatever.
The little monitor that's
The
hooked
bleep
up to
bleep.
me.
Her numbers are just on the right side of okay. But every now and again, she's like, all right, I can maybe go to sleep for a little bit. It starts to drop. And so at one stage, I've got my mum sat next to me, and I wrote out on my phone, is Annie's blood pressure okay? Because I was genuinely scared she was dying, because it was starting to drop and she was getting all peaceful, like, and I was like, I don't like, and I don't know how much blood someone can lose before it gets real dangerous, but we'd seen a lot. So
And every time I had a contraction, my heart rate dropped. And when the ambulance crew picked me up, when we finally got into the ambulance, which took a long time because getting down the stairs without losing consciousness was really hard.
Of course. And they're still telling you don't push, or like we're not sure if you should push or not.
So nobody acknowledged that I was having contractions. they're just like, oh, you're in a lot of pain. You're bleeding.
Having intermittent abdominal pain. You're like, yeah, well, there's a word for that, actually.
Yeah, it's called contractions.
Yeah.
Because my body's trying to expel something that no longer needs to be there.
Yeah, right.
But when we got into the ambulance, I was like apologizing, like, I'm sorry, I'm being dramatic. I'm like apologizing to these ambulance people, like, I'm so sorry if this is dramatic. Like, I'm pregnant and I'm bleeding and it's, I'm fainting and vomiting. And they're like, you're not dramatic.
Like, that's not dramatic. Yeah.
They do my blood pressure again. And they're like, it is really good you're here.
Okay. Yeah.
Because, at a certain point when your blood pressure is dropping, you go into shock, and shock can kill you. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what my body was up against. And John's watching the numbers on the monitor as my blood pressure and my heart rate just keep dropping. And at one point, the nurse came in. They kept checking my blood pressure regularly. And I said, my heart rate keeps dropping every time I have the pain. And I wasn't calling it contraction, just being like the pain. And she was like, that's weird. Usually when people are in pain, their heart rate goes up. And I looked at her and I said, I think I just want to give up. Like, I just wanted to die, And it's not that I wanted to die. I didn't want to leave John, but it's like that pain was so horrible that when it would come on, I was like, just take me,
You're like, it might be that my body is shutting down.
Yeah, it's like my body's
maxed out.
Yeah, we're not willing to go through this anymore.
Sure.
And so I guess to kind of cut a long story short with, kind of what happens, where Annie eventually gets moved from A&E into a ward, which is a substantial upgrade from the broom closet.
It's the bougie private ward.
So, so she got to actually be there.
We're sorry. That's our bad. Obviously, you were in a lot of pain. Here's a nice room.
Yeah. So, that was a massive upgrade. I think we almost felt like things are going a little bit better now, maybe. Because the thing is, if they're not responding like it's an emergency, you kind of go, well, I guess it's not an emergency.
You start gaslighting yourself. Absolutely start gaslighting yourself.
Like, well, I didn't know this episode would become, but I don't know why I didn't predict, of just a brutal takedown of the medical system. Because obviously it sounds like the system itself compounded your trauma, tenfold. And it's like, we all know, we've known for a long time that in any system, a stitch in time saves 9. Preventative care is more. But it's like our system is as far the opposite as it can be. It's to the point where they basically go, when you're at the brink of death, come in and we will treat you lavishly with all of society's resources. And you're like, why not earlier? Like, it would be more efficient. I wouldn't have to go through. I'm sorry. You got me on a soapbox, but
no, but
we feel the same.
It's true. And that's, that is the main frustration with all of this is that scan, it's not like they had to build the machine, like the machine's there. And
there's
there are
multiple of the machine in that hospital. And there are multiple people who know how to use it in that hospital. And the damn thing's on wheels. The fucking thing has wheels.
When it's literally just like
intended to be moved around and used. Yeah.
Well, this is it. And so when it becomes, oh, sorry, well, we couldn't use the machine because of
unit policy.
It's like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
That's not an excuse. You can't say that because, like we say, like at that point, we don't know what's going on. It could be an ectopic pregnancy. And like you're saying, at the point of Annie being in serious danger, it's like, oh, sound, we'll do something now. It's like, just check now.
Yeah. And what's interesting is we had a friend who was in A&E for the same thing the same night.
Yeah.
She also got moved to the private ward. So when our mutual friend found out we're both there, she's like, hey, so-and-so's in that room. She came and visited me and we chatted. She's still pregnant. I'm so happy for her. But we are writing complaints about the hospital and we're both threatening to go to the media, which I guess right now we're going to the media just in America instead of Jersey. By the way, this is about Jersey, Channel Islands, not New Jersey.
Shout out.
OG Jersey.
OG Jersey. But it's one of those things where it's like, it would be so simple to give someone the information. And while that information is hard to hear, I would have known what was going on and the impact of not knowing. It's so profound. And I spent 36 hours not knowing if my baby was dead
It's
or alive.
however long. Right. The length of time you're in limbo is excruciating.
Yeah.
So we're now waiting till Monday morning, where we're told you'll have a scan as soon as the doctor's in, who's flying in from London. So
Which we weren't told that. We're told we're having a scan at 9 a.m. We get to the ward where the scan is to happen. They say, sorry, he's running late. He's coming from the airport.
Okay. So, I mean, that's the reality of living on an island, I suppose, but it's still a frustrating aspect.
There were professionals who knew how to do that scan the entire time
But they're
in
like,
the
if
hospital.
you look at this hierarchy pyramid, I'm not supposed to do the scan on Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever. Yeah.
So eventually we get to the point where we're having the scan. And
Can we say what day it was?
yeah. So
Monday, September 2nd is the day of my scan I've been waiting 36 hours for. Monday, September 2nd was also my 37th birthday.
Oh, boy.
So, yeah. So we're having the scan, and lovely nurse is, being all beautifully empathetic with us. Doctor has zero bedside manner, but in my mind, I'm like, I kind of don't care about his approach to it. I just want to know what the answer is, because like I say, we've been in this limbo state for so long.
I'm laying there crying. He's doing the transvaginal ultrasound, which is like a dildo from hell that they just wave around. I mean, they turn at angles that it just shouldn't happen.
You would not use for pleasure, sure.
No. And he's silent. He's silent. He's absolutely silent. And he's clicking and he's taking photos and he's silent. And John can see the screen, and I say, are you okay seeing the screen? And John says, well, yeah, I have no idea what I'm looking at.
Yeah, because like you've seen an ultrasound in media and stuff like that, and you know that it's a bit abstract at the best of times, but you get a clear sense of what you're looking at. I'm looking at this and I'm like, I haven't got a fucking clue. But also,
I saw an early one. Yeah, it's just shapes. If you're not a doctor, or they'll be like, that's where the placenta meets and you're like, all right, it's just clouds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure it is. But yeah, so I'm kind of trying to read the doctor's body language. And I think at a certain point, I went from, holding out hope to going, I've made the subconscious switch where I know he's about to reveal that it's not okay.
And the way he does it is so fucked. So I'm laying there crying, and he goes, you're 10 weeks in his accent, which I'm not going to try to impersonate. It would be rude. And I say 10 weeks and 3 days. He turns the screen and says, there's no baby. And then explains that the little dot on the screen stopped developing
at 6 weeks. I see. Okay.
Which is when I had the dream.
And when you said, could we like scan it or anything along those lines? The beginning of the debacle. Man, it's all I could think was knowing that it was going to be something like that. I totally do sympathize with and understand the effects that make doctors get in a place where like they're not an inhuman monster, that it's just, but so crazy that you can be in this defining trauma situation in your life, and the doctor's vibe, like John, you were saying, and I'm looking at his body language trying to read it, and usually it's their body language is the body language of someone 7 hours into their shift wondering like, I wonder when I'll get to go home. Like I've been in situations where you're like, don't you care? Aren't you a vet? It's like they do on some level because they became a doctor, but on another level they just can't. I guess that's why we have nurses. Nurses are amazing.
We were his first appointment of the day. He couldn't have been burnt out yet.
Okay, maybe I don't need to do work for the villain, but I guess I'm just saying I think it's an interesting statement about life, which I do believe is beautiful and amazing, that there's so much fucking trauma and darkness that we have to shove it all somewhere and make special people work there who get so used to it that they're like, yeah, baby died. I just gotta, whatever, man. Like, I gotta go to my next thing now.
It was one of those where I was like, couldn't you have said, this will be hard to hear, or I am so sorry, but it was literally
professionalism, dude. Segue. Like
all he said.
Segue. Like, yeah.
There is no baby.
4 words. Yeah.
And then he did go on and explain, he's like, you can put your, go put your trousers on. And so I'm sobbing, making god-awful noises, get dressed, sit down, and then he explains it's measuring at 6 weeks. And I was like, well, we've been banging this whole time. Is there a possibility that it's a new pregnancy? And he softened just a little bit. And he was like, I understand why you'd ask that. And yes, that can happen. But here's how I know it's not. Do you see this shape? It's not a natural round shape. It's deflating because it's done. That's the shape of something that's finished.
And you're like, you literally could have just started the explanation with that sentence, because that's an ease-in explanation. Like, hey, do you see this shape? Like, don't start with, the baby's gone. Now let me back up and explain how we got here, you fucker.
There's so many, choose your own adventure. Why did I get the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst? I don't know.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I don't want my story to be any more colorful. Like, we're good. We've reached max color. I don't need these horrible little things to throw in.
So one of the things that Annie said straight afterwards, which has really stuck with me throughout this, is when we found out that the pregnancy essentially had stopped at 6 weeks, she said, it feels like my body's gaslit me, because, all this time we're like talking to her stomach, where, I guess we should add the aspect that we had named not the child, but the pregnancy.
I see.
Because
I understand the bit.
Annie's all clued up in this, like the biology of life and all these things.
I love science.
So she was telling me that pre-fetus, it's a blastocyst, right?
Right.
So she's introduced me to this term, and I'm like, whatever. So we started nicknaming it Blasto. So that just became a little fun thing of like, arguably you could say that kind of creating that kind of humanization of the pregnancy is exactly why you shouldn't do that, because it becomes more difficult to deal with the consequence of a miscarriage if it doesn't work out. But we'd done it, and I think we wouldn't change anything about it, because it made the pregnancy for us feel even more special. But knowing that we had put that much effort into something where it was like they weren't even there at 6 weeks was really tough to kind of step back from and be like, I kind of feel foolish, like I feel embarrassed that,
I suppose,
where they're
but I
like
agree
touching the stomach and everything.
But you got to live at the vibration you live at, meaning like, don't do bits, because that's who you are. Yeah. I absolutely,
We celebrated when I got to 8 weeks. I texted John and I said, Blasto's a fetus now. Happy fetus day.
Yeah.
Blasto never made it to be a fetus. And what's so fucking ironic, in my love of science and nicknaming the pregnancy after a phase of development, it never made it past that phase. It maxed out at Blasto. It's like we loved Blasto so much that it was like, you know what? Boop, I'm gonna fucking, like, I'm so loved being a blastocyst. I don't need to go through the rest of existence. I've made it. Done.
Yeah,
Reached enlightenment.
But I'm not just trying to be positive when I say that bit and the joking and flirting and love shown in that, that it exists here. It's in Bill's house. It's in Jim's house. Like, I don't actually think it diminishes it. It doesn't diminish the trauma of it either, but you were talking to each other. You could talk to her stomach. That's still cute. You could talk to her stomach right now.
Hi, poop.
Yeah, exactly. Hi, I'll see you soon. But I do want to get into how does this bode for like future attempts to get pregnant? Are you trying to? Are you trying again? Are you waiting? Where are we at? What's the future hold?
Well, so I think that's where it becomes like a tale of two stories, because the initial pregnancy was it was essentially from the point of us going, all right, we're actively going to try now. Oh, sweet, we're pregnant. Fuck, we're good at this. Riding quite a lot of confidence into it, loving every moment, or like beginning the nesting stage, to then having to find our feet after the miscarriage. And, we've not been successful getting pregnant immediately.
Right.
And even that, it's like, well, we can sit there and go, that's a completely fair expectation to not be pregnant straight away. Annie's body's got to recover. We've got to go through some stuff. Mm-hmm. But there was this sense of like, if we can just get back on the horse immediately, then all of a sudden, that grief's in the background, but now we've got a new thing that we're focusing on. And I think just accepting for both of us that I think there was a delay in wanting to experience the grief, because it was like, let's just focus on moving on, as everyone keeps saying.
Sounds like classic denial. Let's focus on the task at hand. And then a few months later you go, we have to go back and process our emotion before we move on.
To be fair, I had 2 weeks off of work. Mm-hmm. So that Monday we had the scan. We found out Blasted was not with us. And we were doing a natural miscarriage. So they sent us home to pass the rest of the miscarriage. What he showed me on the scan is that all the pain was the sac detaching from my uterus and being pushed down to my cervix. Mm. So that was all the contractions for 6 hours. That's how long it took for little Blasto buddy to travel their way down to the exit. But they hadn't exited yet. They were still in there. And it was Thursday. So came home Monday. And I didn't pass the sac until Thursday.
Boy.
Yeah. And what's interesting is after I had a dream, and that same voice from the dream in August said, the pain's not over yet. And I wake up.
Voice. Is the voice anyone recognizable?
The voice is my body.
With anything?
The voice is my body.
Think of as
it's actually
from your body.
It is my body. Like I know it is. I don't care if I sound like I'm a crazy hippie. It's my body, and it's true because the next day I had a huge contraction while I was sitting on the couch. And my friend came over from London. She's amazing. She came to take care of me because on Tuesday John started his brand new job. Mm-hmm.
Which wasn't ideal.
Right,
but
obviously.
anyone who's ever worked in a school knows that the first 2 weeks of term, like you can't miss those 2 weeks, especially when you're brand new to that school. Because I was like, if I don't go, then trying to pick up the pieces of this entirely new role in 2 weeks' time is going to be a nightmare. And I already felt like I'm going to get a lot of pushback from staff members for not being there. And because we had Annie's friend coming over, it was like, and we spoke about it. I was like, is it okay if I go? Because I think I would, whilst I don't want to distract myself from processing in the full sense, a little bit of distraction now sounds quite nice, like focus on something completely different. Mm-hmm. But I went into that job on my first day, told my employers what was happening or what had happened. And I was like, look, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be here until I emotionally can't, because there's no point in me being here if I'm just an emotional wreck. Fortunately, it kind of played out absolutely fine. But that's why this week we're on now, has been an absolute gift, because for 8 weeks, I've not had any time to like just be with myself and kind of process everything. It's kind of like hours here and there, as opposed to me being on my own for a little while. Mm-hmm. So that's been, again, like another tough part of this is it feels like people will be quite sympathetic towards what's going on in the immediate aftermath. And that's amazing. But 8 weeks on, for me to say to my employer, like, I feel like I need a week off because I'm still grieving the miscarriage is a bit like, come on, man. Like, what do you mean? And they've never said that, but that is absolutely the feeling that I get from it.
Absolutely. And it's tricky because ideally I'd have to meditate on what would be ideal. But, in our vision of a future where everyone gets needs met, it would be arbitrary or I like, for example, as someone who just has fucked up brain chemistry, so I can be depressed for no reason, it feels fair to me that I should be able to tell my boss, I'm not working today because my brain won't allow me to. I'll make it up another day. But people are like, no, something has to have happened. There needs to be some incident in your life that I can go, oh, in that story, it makes sense that you'd be upset. Like, to me, that seems arbitrary because my mood is not related to exigent circumstances usually. But yeah, it's interesting. The herd uses sort of unspoken shame to enforce you're allowed to be this sick for this long or this sad for this long. And then we kind of need you to get back on the bus or do whatever service you provided us. We need that back. I feel like you're speaking to how great we are at compartmentalizing, and it can trick you into thinking you'll go back to work and be like, well, when I'm at work, despite my heartbreaking, I act like normal. And I even am like joking with people because it's the same circumstances. But just saying to listeners who may not know this yet, the amount of trauma you have set aside is still sitting there unprocessed. Like, you always eventually have to do it.
It's waiting
can't
for
put it
you.
off forever. It's annoying, but true. Yeah.
I think I felt like I got a therapist right away. The day I got home from the hospital, I'm calling my insurance, getting a therapist and stuff. But it's true that we were like, as soon as we got the green light to try again, which was pretty soon after, it did kind of like distract us and consume us. Like, oh, we're going to try again. This is great. This is something happy. This is exciting. When my period started, I was wrecked. A, because blood's going to remind me of the miscarriage, and B,
It's like an echo of, yeah.
And the thing about when you have a miscarriage, and maybe this isn't true for everybody, 6 hours of contractions. Imagine if you lifted weights for 6 hours straight. What are your arms going to be like after? Like, A, sore, and then B, stronger. So a regular period cramp was more like the most intense thing ever.
Wow.
And I almost fainted at work. Fainting's my new specialty. I wish I could get paid for it. But I had to take half a day off of work because my blood pressure was dropping again because the cramps were so intense. And I told one of my colleagues, she was like kind of in charge of our team that day, like our manager just left the job. And I said, listen, the only reason I'm here is because capitalism was created by a man and I have to be here and I'm in a lot of pain and I'm doing my best. And she was like, okay. And then when I started fainting, I was like, actually, I've got to go. But it brought home to me when my first period after the miscarriage started, which was just 2 weeks ago, I was like, oh, it hasn't been that long.
Mm-hmm.
It like put it into perspective, like, because it feels like it's been years. It feels like being pregnant was forever ago, but I've had one period since,
Right. Yeah.
And it brought the grief back to like, absolutely. I just felt like I was right back in it. And now I'm writing a complaint to the hospital and that's bringing me right back in it. I showed up last Thursday to work and I said, I can't be on the phones. And I just started crying. I walked into work and immediately started crying. I was like, I spent all last night crying. I can't be on the phones today.
Yeah.
Like, you're welcome that I'm here. Here's my gift to you. I'll answer some emails, but I'm a fucking wreck and I can't talk to anyone.
Yeah. And but it's good. Or I just want to be a voice saying like, all wisdom we ever gain comes from the dark times and trauma and suffering and trial and error. And it doesn't make suffering worthwhile because, or in my opinion, nothing is inherently like we give things meaning or we don't. But the fact that you can't set aside your trauma means you have to process it. And therefore sitting there feeling shitty is productive. That's part of you're doing it. Like, imagine yourself in a horrible garage and you're cleaning it out. Like, you can't not be in it if you're going to complain to the hospital, and you should complain to the hospital because that bears a complaint, but it's going to put you in it, obviously. And I just used it in a video, but I use it all the time. One of the quotes that's really helped me in life is the George Bernard Shaw, which is that things don't cease to be funny when other things are tragic and vice versa. I'm misquoting it, but I lived a long time thinking it's weird, or like we're just like, how can I be happy and then sad, or why is life not consistent like a movie? And you just got to get over that. There's like trauma and joy coexist constantly, and it can be very confusing. So, like, you know, my thoughts are with you in navigating that, but I also have great confidence that you'll be able to accept both those things and move forward.
One of the things, like once we were kind of out of the immediate aftermath of everything, Annie went quite deep into listening to like miscarriage podcasts and reading books about miscarriages, and we got sent some resources from a charity over here about it. And it's almost like we'd gone from being so in step with each other, like prior to the miscarriage, I don't think our relationship had ever been stronger. It was like we were just firing on all cylinders. It was a great time to be us. And then in this process period, Annie was leaning deeper into understanding miscarriages, what causes them, what's the reality of them. And I was kind of, I guess because of work and things like that, going the opposite way of, I just want to process my emotions, but I do eventually just want to move on. And there was
you're like, hopefully it will be moot because this won't happen next time, and we can just
to some extent, yeah. I mean, accepting it for what it is and going, I need to prepare myself in case this does happen again, because this was awful. And I'm not at the stage of saying it's not worth us going through it again, because we've spoken to other friends who have been through several miscarriages and go, it's worth it, kind of keep going to the point that you're comfortable, obviously. And friction might even be far too strong of a word, but there was a point for both Annie and I where I had said to her, like, I think you're going down this kind of rabbit hole too much. Like, I think if I'm sidestepping my processing a little bit, you're almost jumping too much into it and creating more, more distress at this stage.
Maybe. That's a very standard way to process, though, is deeply educate yourself on the thing that was traumatic.
Well, so like I knew about miscarriage from the get-go. Like when John and I found out we were pregnant, we're jumping up and down, crying, laughing, happy. I put my hands on his shoulders and I said, if this one doesn't stick, that's okay. We can try again. You know,
and
within minutes
you named it Blasto, and you so just to compare, like my wife, out of us the same sense of knowing miscarriages can totally happen, you shouldn't think it's not normal, blah blah blah, was like, don't talk about names, don't even tell people we're pregnant, don't even think of it as alive, who cares, it's just a thing in my body, it could go away tomorrow, was like trying to get ahead of that feeling. And I really think it's just a personal choice, and you get what you get. Like the more you put your heart out there, the more you risk it getting stomped on, and that hurts, but you also get more like vulnerable.
Yeah, and I don't regret it at all. And I've said that the whole time, is like
having the Blasto relationship.
Yeah, like having love for every moment that we had the pregnancy was the right thing for us. And I think our next pregnancy will deserve that as well, you know? And that was part of why I didn't give up hope. I taught this. So my one night in the private ward, they didn't let John stay. So I'm by myself. I was terrified. Every time I got up to go to the bathroom, I was miserable because he's not there. What he didn't mention is when we went to the bathroom, he was checking the toilet and my pads for me because I couldn't bear to look. And I was afraid that I would see the fetus.
Yeah.
And it was fucking horrendous. It was just absolutely horrendous. This doctor comes in at like 10:30 p.m. and he gives me a pep talk about how you can bleed so much during pregnancy.
I'm an ass.
This is another guy. He was really kind, but he's again unwittingly filling me full of false hope because nobody knows. Nobody's seen a scan. Nobody knows what's going on. And so he gives me all this hope about like, I could still be pregnant.
That's what. Don't just be nice just to be nice. If it's not, man.
Yeah. And he walked me through my options if I was having a miscarriage, right? So he's the reason that I said no to a D&C because I was like, I don't want to get scarred. That's not worth it. You know, the rates of getting horrible scar tissue over here is real bad. He's like, British doctors really suck at D&Cs. Like, don't get one. He's not from the UK. I won't say where he's from because I don't want him to get in trouble. He was great. And we have a friend whose uterus was horribly scarred by a DNC because she didn't know that. And it led to a bunch of like future infertility. It was horrible. So anyway,
Wow.
I told him that like I loved my baby enough that I felt like it was worth it to not give up hope until the last minute, that I felt my baby deserved that. My baby deserved for me to hold that hope until somebody told me to let go of it. You know? And so until Mr. Mean Doctor turned the screen and told me there is no baby.
Yeah.
Right? I felt like it was the kindest thing that I could do. And I spent that night laying in the hospital, crying with my hands on my stomach, talking to Blasto. And I was saying, I love you and I want you.
Yeah.
And I understand that you're an individual and you're on your own path. And if you can't be with us, I respect that.
Yeah. Well, if I may ask, I like to always, and it is an acceptable answer to say we're too close to it still, but, you know, we're here to normalize first and foremost, and I think people will be very appreciative and feel seen just hearing you share your experiences, but also, is there any wisdom that you would add that has crystallized for you through this trauma where you're like, if I were to go through this again, this would be my advice, or this is my 2 cents to toss on the pile of all the things people have said about navigating miscarriage?
I think for me, what really stood out throughout all of this is that, like I said before, prior to the miscarriage, our relationship was... I really looked at it and went, this is the happiest I've ever been. Like, everything is amazing. And then going through the after effects of the miscarriage, like, if I could feel us distancing, but only in the sense that we were at a point where we were so close that any amount of distance was noticeable. And that was deeply uncomfortable because I was like, that was a frightening kind of place to be in, and recognizing that it almost felt like we were going through a breakup, in this sense of like, well, why is there this tension in the air between us? And the only thing that remedied that was just being completely open and honest with each other about what we were experiencing. Obviously, for Annie, you know, there was the obvious sense of the physicality of the miscarriage, but like, this is why I love her so much, is she would check in on me and be like, how are you feeling about all of this? And some days I was like, I can't access how I feel. I know something's wrong, and give it a few days. And then I would just be like, I'm struggling because what I've learned about kind of my friends in Jersey, and kind of in a wider sense, some of them, of male friends, I should say, some of them kind of immediately came to me and like, John, I'm so sorry about what's going on. I'm going to check in with you every day. Most of my male friends, I've got friends who've not even said anything to me about this. And like, we've posted like online, because I posted a message. We hadn't gone public with the pregnancy, just our close friends knew about it. But when Annie was in the hospital, I was like, if people believe in prayer or sending good energy or whatever, like, we need it right now. And then it gave me some kind of comfort for processing in that moment to kind of update people. This is what's happening. Unfortunately, it's this. And normalizing it for ourselves and not going like, oh, we have to be hidden in shame. But I found myself very vulnerable, that I was just kind of left to dealing with my emotions myself and with Annie. So Annie's like checking in on me, but because I'm, you know, training to be a therapist, it's like, okay, well, I know how to ask myself questions. I know how to check in emotionally, see if I'm okay, take some time off if I need it. But the lack of support I found from kind of my close friends who had proximity to me was quite upsetting. And I think that's not because my friends actually hate me.
Male friends.
I think, male friends. I think it's because for men, this is such an abstract concept. You know, it's difficult to go. I think men get into this kind of protective zone of like, it's the woman who's having the miscarriage and I'm there to be strong and support her. And absolutely, that is a role that you step into. But there is a point where it's like, it's your miscarriage as well. And you need to be able to check in with yourself and check in with friends who they can actually maybe ask you those kind of different questions. You know, what is it like being the guy in that situation, because I was surrounded by a lot of female energy, which was great, but I don't know, like it's the argument for having different perspectives checking in on you. So it was immensely important that Annie was there as my shoulder to cry on and helping me to manage my emotions. And I always knew that she was there for me. But it also highlighted that I don't think I would be alone in saying that for many men, it becomes a very silent affair where you're just kind of left dealing with it on your own in a general sense. Mm-hmm. And that male friends can be a bit like, oh shit, I don't know what to do about this.
Well, it seems analogous to, it's a weird puritanical outgrowth of the culture thing where, so I'm reminded of the way that I have the privilege, or had up to a certain point, of going through life going, oh boy, rapists, wow. What a crazy concept that there's someone that evil in the world. I wonder if I'll ever meet that one guy. And then, I think as a lot of us have been, or a lot of men have been informed over the past 30 years, you're like, hey, did you know many, many women you know personally have either been raped or someone has tried to rape them? And you're like, oh, word? I never hear about it. And you're like, yeah, because it's unpleasant to talk about. And that itself abets this culture where our, Bill Cosby or whatever, Harvey Weinstein, people can just be an open seat like, oh, yeah, that guy rapes everyone. We don't. For 30 years, no one has done anything about it. And it seems like, I feel like miscarriage, I got way embarrassingly late in life before I even understood it as a trauma. I just thought of it as, oh, you didn't get it this time, so you try again and get it next time. And then you talk to a woman who's miscarried, and you hear a story where they're like, I was essentially in false labor for 36 hours, praying to my God that my baby might live, with the doctor fucking around with me. Like it's like a life-defining, maybe a top 10 trauma in your life. And it's just crazy that we don't, men largely, I think, are not exposed to the understanding both the normalcy of a miscarriage, but also the depth to which it can be just such a difficult thing to get over. And as someone who's on the verge of a kid coming, knock on wood, healthy and happy, it is wild to me to think that it's worth it, but I believe everyone. This is my first kid too, so I don't know. That's why we're doing this series, but I believe that if you guys try and succeed, that you'll go, that was worth it, and I base that on what people have told me, but I think that is the case. So, hey, must be pretty good then if it's going to be worth it, right? That's a way to look at it.
Yes, there's a few 5-star reviews that we've seen, so
I think
worth checking out.
The miracle of life.
During our pregnancy, I talked to John a lot about the possibility of miscarriage. Mm-hmm. And, we would talk about blasto, we'd be happy, we'd be excited. And I'd be like, but remember, we're still not at 12 weeks. We're not at that safe space. We're getting closer. That's exciting. We made the choice to share early because we didn't even know if I could get pregnant, right? Wanted to celebrate every moment. From my experience and from the podcasts I've listened to and the friends who've reached out to me, it doesn't matter if you name it or don't name it. It doesn't matter if you talk to it or you don't talk to it. You cannot protect yourself from the pain. There's nothing you can do to protect yourself from the pain if you miscarry. And maybe you are one of those women who can compartmentalize, shut it off. Fucking amazing. Write a book, please. That's great.
There's so many different types of people. I'm sure someone out there has that.
Someone out there. Yeah.
Perspicacity, but yeah. On average,
but,
no.
There was a moment with that kind of that distance feeling that John's talking about. The only time that I ever really felt it was when we were talking and he said something about, I don't know if it was being surprised about the miscarriage or what, but I said, I knew the likelihood because of, I think it was the moment of being like, this is really in my body. Mm-hmm. And I knew the whole time how likely it was because of the cancer, because of my age, because it's likely no matter what time. And also because I had a miscarriage when I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, I was like, this isn't my first miscarriage.
Yeah.
Completely different. And that's something that shocked me is that I thought I knew what a miscarriage was. But as a teen, your little flexible, springy body, so different. Right. And also, I was a teen. I didn't process it properly. I just had nightmares for years and would cry whenever anyone cracked a dead baby joke. You know, it was awful. I had dreams of that baby growing up. She has a name. Like down to her having a name, I know what her hair looks like. It's bananas, you know, because you grow it in your body. Yeah. It's an alive creature until it's not, and you're growing it and you share DNA with it. And
you'll never forget about that.
You'll never forget.
They live in
but
your
I think
head.
that was one of the issues in the hospital is I kept comparing it to the miscarriage I had as a teen. And I was like, well, this isn't happening and this isn't happening. So maybe this really isn't a miscarriage. You know, when I had a miscarriage before, it was like this and this isn't, you know, like just comparing little tiny details that were completely irrelevant.
Yeah, my understanding is the miscarriage experience can vary extremely widely, right?
So extremely.
Ways
Yeah.
It can go. Yeah.
And I know that no matter how much I love science, no matter how likely I knew it was, it didn't change the depth of the pain. And when the doctor told us, you know, all those things, and we sat down and he's showing us the screen measuring, explaining the deflating sac and everything, he started to try to explain miscarriage to me, and I'm sobbing. I cut him off and I said, stop. I love science. I understand why this happened. I get it. It was a genetic abnormality. My body chose to end it. You don't need to explain it. I understand.
The science explanation will not comfort me in this moment. Please don't do that.
Well, yeah, and I was like, and I know it, and I don't need you to dumb it down for me. Like, I understand it on a highly scientific level. I don't need you to give me the dumb person version. I get why it happened. And then I was like, but there's nothing wrong with my body because I had cervical cancer. He's like, nope, everything looks good. I went and I had a second opinion a week later. They had me come back and have another scan to make sure everything came out. I went to another doctor. I got a second opinion. I've had a lot of scans since then, and I know there's nothing wrong with my body, which at first was a huge blessing because it's like, oh, it's not the cancer, which means that my cervix is okay, which means we can try again. Yeah. But it wasn't until recently that I had that what the fuck moment of like, there is no reason, right? There was a genetic abnormality because there was, and that's the only reason. And like, I got angry because if it was because of my cervix, at least I know, well, I'm a cancer survivor. I'm alive. That's really fucking cool. But instead it's like, oh yeah, you're just one of the lottery. You pulled the short straw, you know?
Oh, you don't like having it rubbed in your face that the universe is arbitrary and uncaring?
No, seriously. And I started crying.
This is why we're like, maybe God exists. Maybe there's a magic guy and stuff does make sense. Maybe.
I was laying in bed reading my friend's complaint to the hospital, and I hadn't written my complaint yet. And John turns to me and he says, oh, so-and-so had their baby. And he shows me a photo. And that is like, I lost it. I completely lost it. And I was like, it's not fucking fair. Nothing's fucking fair. Nothing makes sense. And I'm miserable. You know, and this is like 6 weeks after the miscarriage. I'm like, I'm fucking miserable. I'm depressed. I'm sad. I'm not happy for that person, you know, which makes me feel bad because I think I'm a loving and kind person.
Right.
Right. But you know what I mean? Yeah. Just like spinning out. And John,
you won't always be miserable, but it will always be unfair and nonsensical. I do think reality is unfair and nonsensical.
It is,
but that doesn't mean you have to be miserable all the time.
No, but you know, I ended up going out to the couch and just like crying because like John was listening to me doing his best, and then he started to fall asleep. He falls asleep real fast, and I just knew that he was done. He's shutting down. Like do. John is done. So I go out to the couch and I'm sobbing, and it was one of those like that deep sorrow where I was like, will I ever stop crying? And then I meditated. I'm a Buddhist. I don't know if you caught on to that. So, you know, going through contractions, meditating, Buddhism. That's why. So I do a meditation. I message some friends who are awake in America. And then I say, all right, I'm okay. It's time to go to bed. And then the next day was when I went into work and started crying and said, like, I can't be on the phones, you know? And it it's one of those where
It's going to go back and forth. Yeah.
well, the same thing when the nurses and the doctors are all, the nurse in the scan room, she was so kind, and she handed me a box that was like a miscarriage box. And I said, nope, don't want that. Handed it back to her. I was like, I can't even look at that.
Like an
But I
aftercare
said to them,
box?
yeah, it's from a nonprofit called Philip's Footprints, and they're a stillbirth and miscarriage nonprofit. They're lovely. But I was like, listen, I've lost a lot of people in my life. I know how to grieve. I know about grief.
I don't need the
Do you know
goodie
what?
bag that everyone
But-
gets. Yeah.
But I learned from this experience, I don't know about grief. Even though I've had a miscarriage before, I've lost a child before, I didn't know about this grief. You can't prepare yourself. Do you know what I mean? And like, we're going to waste so much energy trying to prepare ourselves for things when if you just live in the moment, that's the best thing you can do.
Oh, yeah, always. No one in my nuclear family's died yet, but obviously it's an inevitability unless I tragically die very suddenly. And it's like, I can't believe I'm 40 and it's still an abstraction to me, but things cannot be real until they happen. There are things like I can sit here all I want and think I have where I go. So imagine your mom, you couldn't talk to her or see her. Oh yeah, that'd be really sad. Imagine how sad you've ever been. Imagine it's double that. But like, I won't know what it feels like until it happens. And almost every cardinal emotional experience in life seems to be that way. It's crazy to me how often I'll have a moment in life and go, oh, this is what whoever meant when I was 16. And they said, one day this will happen and you'll feel this way. And I'm like, they were right. It does feel that way. So I guess listen to the wisdom of people around you. There is, we are all trying to pass it down the line and help each other out. I see that John has
if there's one thing that I could just add into that, then for the sake of anyone who may be listening who's going through a miscarriage or recently has been through one thing that we chose to do off of the advice of my therapist, and I think someone else had also offered it as a suggestion, when we were still in that kind of that real grey, depressive state, was to have a little kind of ceremony for saying goodbye, to almost say goodbye on our terms, because whilst we hadn't done a lot of nesting, like I got this little mini Lego Blastoise thing because I thought that was a fun little connection. We had a couple little trinkets and we were just like, we're not going to keep hold of these because they don't have tremendous emotional significance because they didn't belong to anyone.
And you want a fresh start with
exactly.
just too much baggage.
John made me a bracelet that said Blasto and had the date of the day we found out we were pregnant.
Oh, yeah.
And I was waiting to wear it at work till after my 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a couple.
Is that gone?
It's gone.
Yeah. Because we decided it's got to be everything. Like we'll always remember, and that's fine. But because we were talking about it and going, how would we feel if a new child we bring into this world one day is like, what's this? And it's like, oh, that's from the miscarriage. Like I didn't know until a few years ago that I'm the result of 2 miscarriages, and it was a really strange
thing. People keep it secret to the degree that if you go one generation back, it's like it's supposed to be a secret. Like my uncle one day took us to a cemetery and took us to a grave, and it's like, that's our first baby. And we're like, why am I learning about this at age 22? Or you're allowed to talk about they had a baby that died when there was 1. And it's like, did you feel that you weren't allowed to ever mention them? It's actually weird that I've known you for 25 years and you've never mentioned them.
This was what was strange, was talking to my mum about it and being like, I had no idea you'd been through that. And I don't think she was keeping it secret so much as just being like, oh, well, you never asked, But it just really had this profound effect to me. I was like, oh, I feel quite guilty that you had to go through 2 awful experiences. And this was way before I ever experienced a miscarriage. But to be like, you had to go through significant sadness and then I'm here. But there was supposed to be someone else.
Plus the birthing process and all the shit you constantly put me through.
Well, exactly.
He's a sweet baby.
But so going back to the point, so we had these things and it was just like, we're okay with going, we can separate because these things aren't Blasto. Blasto was a thing that is gone. We very much know that Blasto is gone in all physical sense. So we can get rid of the items, but like just throwing them away felt very callous, you know? So what we ended up doing was...
we cut the string on the bracelet.
Yeah, cut the string on the bracelet.
So it was just beads.
We wrote notes to Blasto from each of us of just like the things that we were going to miss, what we were excited about for the future, and really like focusing on what the grief is about. Because again, it's the grief is the abstract loss of the concept of being a parent. You know, what I was excited for about being a dad. And it was the first time I'd said to anyone, I was saying it to myself, writing down, like, I was really looking forward to being your dad. And like, that still makes me feel emotional now, saying that.
Yeah.
So, you know, we decided, we went down to the beach where Annie first felt that she wasn't alone. In the sense of being pregnant, she had this again like a premonition of like,
well, there
someone
were two
else is
sets
here.
of footsteps along the beach.
So we go down to the beach and we go, we're going to burn these letters. We're going to speak the letters aloud. Then we're going to burn them, and we're just going to experience that moment. And we're there in the beach, like sobbing our eyes out. But it felt like that was going. We are, as weird as this sounds, scheduling grief. To be like, we are actively going to lean into these emotions, not hide away from them. You know, I've not got to go to work. You know, Annie's not on the couch or like in pain. It's like we are at a point where we can really focus on this. And it was a way for us to kind of say, well, the way we termed it afterwards is like asking Blasto to be like, we'd quite like to move on and not think about you every day. Because that's the thing, we were just constantly going back like, oh, we miss Blasto, saying Blasto like every fucking sentence, you know? And it was like, this is the issue of getting so emotionally invested in the first place, is you have to emotionally uninvest to quite a strong degree as well, I believe.
Well, and if you have something like a stillbirth, you probably have a funeral. But when it's as early as 10 weeks... There's nothing, you know, like
unless
when
you
go
go
on with
yourself,
life.
right.
Well,
Exactly,
and when I passed the sack that had Blasto in it, I shouted from the bathroom, and John came in and I said goodbye and flushed it. It was so bizarre.
Yeah.
It's like flushing a pet goldfish.
Right.
And I went into shock and I got really hyper and I couldn't sleep till 2 a.m.
Yeah, surreal. Yeah.
John went into our bedroom and started crying, which I didn't know because I was in the bathroom with my friend who'd had a miscarriage. So she's like, yep, that's what that is. That's the sack. She looks in the toilet. And I'm like, bye, Blasto, and flush it. And it was just so weird. But having that ceremony, right? Like having a moment to honor what mattered to us. Like, but it was right after that we started trying. And I think kind of we're like, okay, well, we had that ceremony. Now we can shut the door. And that's one piece of advice is like, let the grief take as long as it's going to take, and like be prepared for it to come and go, you know? And I do know that about grief. Grief comes in waves. It's not linear. It doesn't have a clock. It doesn't give a fuck what you're doing. Doesn't care about your schedule. It's going to show up when it wants to show up. And if you don't honor it, it's going to make you go crazy. So you've got to give yourself that space when it comes, you know, and it will, like, it'll come and go for as long as it needs to. And
absolutely.
Yeah. Like, no, we can't predict how anyone else's grief would go, but all I can say with quite clear certainty is that being open about what you're experiencing makes that journey so much, I'm not even going to say easier because it's still rough, but like you start moving rather than staying still, or even worse, like going backwards.
It's worth sharing. It's worth sharing if it makes somebody uncomfortable. I put a post, I said, from here on out, consider my Instagram dedicated to miscarriage. Feel free to unfollow me. Like, feel free to mute me. That's fine. And I keep sharing about it. I keep posting about it because I'm like, I want you to know that, like, it's not over. It's not like, oh, I'm home from the hospital, it's over. No, it took me a week for all of the tissue to come out. And then I had to have another scan. And then I had to have another scan. And like, I had to be on medication for 10 days. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was a really long process that's not over, because when I had my first period, I was like, oh, this is my first period since the miscarriage. Like, now it's over, but the grief isn't over. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not something, like, if people are shy to talk to you about it at a certain point, it's like, I'm thinking about it. Don't worry. Like, you're not reminding me. I'm never going to forget. it's not going to define me. It's not going to be an everyday thing, but like, I'll never be upset if somebody brings it up or asks me how I'm doing. You know?
That's true of all highly traumatized people. You'd be like, oh, well, and you're like, brain cancer? I know, I have it. Or like, we're always scared to remind people of, they're like, I know, I'm in a wheelchair. I'm in the wheelchair or whatever. But, true wisdom. I think we've found a lot of good wisdom here. I do think everyone's different. It's a feeling it out process, but usually sharing is a good way to go, hence the existence of this show. The only thing I want to add as I sort of absorb wisdom from you who are so kind to share it is a bit about the relationship piece, which is, don't think that trauma is, I would advise people out there to not think that trauma is about more than it is. Meaning, John, you referenced a couple times the relationship feeling different or texturally, and all I can say, having gone through similar traumas that also destabilized the relationship with my person, is that you're just sad about the miscarriage. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of, I have thousands of times in my life, I'm sad and I'm sitting next to Jen, so something must be wrong with our relationship. There must be a reason I'm sad related to the circumstances mathematically that are going on around me. And I just want to tell listeners something I picked up from this conversation is like, yeah, that's a good thing to remember, is that's not true. Your person's still your person. You're just as dedicated to the abstract concept of being a father. That didn't die with Blasto. Blasto is a testament to that. So shout out to Blasto. We are as with you in your grief as, a community of strangers can be, but so cool to know that you are actively reaching out to your community, and hopefully people are reaching back. Thank you guys for being
appreciate
here.
You putting us on this. I sat by the email that I originally sent you for a couple of days, because obviously your series focusing on the positives of becoming a dad, and the realities of it. And I was just like, I don't know, I kind of feel like you might be interested in this has just happened. This feels like this could be quite an interesting slice of the other side. And that's the thing, like we're still happy, we're still very much in love, and that's the reality of grief, right? It's just some days it's like, I just feel shit.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, that's fine.
That's what
it doesn't need to be like, right, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and let's move on with life. It's like, no, some days, some hours are difficult.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely fine. But I think, I feel so much more confident in the relationship because we've been through this, as much as I wish we never had to. But it's like every time Annie's gone, trust me in being able to kind of hold you if you need to talk about how you're feeling. Like she's got a perfect batting average there. But my mind is always still going to be like, oh, what if this is too much to share? And it's like, fuck that. Like, be honest with your partner. It makes it better.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It does.
Yeah, step one.
And that's one of those things too, like, just really briefly, for the men, is it a man who's experiencing miscarriage, like, your experience matters as much as the woman's. It was your child too. And I read in a book, it was like, you're a mother from the day you see those two lines. You're a father from the day you see those two lines. Until that baby's born, it's abstract, and it's as valid for both people.
And I think for most people, it makes you feel seen and validated and resonates if your partner also is sad. Like the 50s dad idea of, well, I'll just let you handle that and I'll stay strong. It's like, I feel like that would just make you feel isolated.
Oh, it would be horrible. It would
Yeah.
be so horrible. Like, yeah. I mean, yeah, cry with me. It helps.
That's what I was going to say. So let's all just put it all out there. Cry at strangers. Tell everyone what your problems are. This is the way. I am going to ask for plugs, which I usually don't, just because I know John has a fabulous podcast as well. Annie, I don't know if you have any public endeavors you want to push, but
I have an Instagram that I could
Science.
unprivate.
yeah,
Science.
okay, sure. Yeah, science generally. John, where can people find you talking about other topics?
So They can find me on Instagram at John Liot, JohnLiot, or the podcast which you just mentioned, which is called I'm Glad You Exist, which Michael has been on. And you should absolutely check out that episode.
All righty.
My Instagram is OUI.ANNY, we Annie. So if you're going through a miscarriage and you want to talk about it, you can message me.
Yeah, that's about it, really.